This is Larry Jordan, the host of the Digital Production Buzz. The following interview is an excerpt from a recent program. To hear the entire program, visit digitalproductionbuzz.com. Scott Hosfeld is the Conductor and Music Director of the award-winning Malibu Coast Chamber Orchestra. He also works with producers, directors, and writers creating music for major motion pictures, independent films, television, and video gaming. He has decades of experience as a conductor, composer, musician, entrepreneur, and an institution builder. Welcome, Scott. Good to have you with us.
Thanks very much. Happy to be
Scott,
here.
how old were you when you knew you wanted to be in music?
I think I was about 3 or 4 years old, and my parents had a little thing where I could play their 45 RPM singles, and I would stand down in the basement and sing my head off, and I just loved music from the beginning.
So when was your first paying gig?
Probably truly right when I was in college. I think there was somebody who was recruiting kids to do very off-contract session work with using student labor, and I think I got paid a few times to make some recordings or at least back up for.
Well, I was just looking at your resume. You've been a performer, a composer, a conductor. How do you view yourself? Do you think of yourself as a musician, a composer, conductor, performer? How would you describe it?
I would say I think of myself as a performer, maybe first and foremost. That's what drew me in, the actual hands-on production of music with an instrument in my hands. And then from there, and with a particular focus actually on intimate music making. I always loved chamber music. I liked playing with a handful of people where everybody mattered. And then it grew from there. I spent probably the first 20 years of my career touring with a string quartet all around the country and had various residencies at various universities. And then I kind of ran out of steam with that direction and built a destination chamber music center and school in the mountains of central Washington, destination music spot, kind of like a miniature Tanglewood or Banff.
So your principal instrument is what?
Viola is my main instrument, although I would call myself equally a violinist. I, by happenstance, ended up playing viola for those 20 years in a string quartet, so I kind of got used to it.
So when we talk, because I'm a little ignorant here on chamber music, when we talk chamber, are we talking about just a few instruments, a few people versus a full orchestra?
Exactly.
And what instruments are we talking about?
So a string quartet, a formal string quartet, is 2 violins, viola, and cello. And it's led me so much into the direction I've come to now with media, simply because a lot of composers put a lot of their best efforts, channeled a tremendous amount of energy and creativity into writing for that particular combination. And so you have groups, I was one of them, that toured all over to people that particularly like that form. It's a little bit like seeing a really great rock band because everybody in it you can identify as a personality, and they're all contributing their energy towards making music. Unlike in a symphony orchestra where you're sort of encouraged to be a blender and a conformer, and the real star is the conductor.
Which gets me to the Malibu Coast Chamber Orchestra that you're a conductor for. Tell me about this.
Well, my wife and I, her name is Maria Newman. She comes from the Newman family, the Alfred, Randy, Thomas, family? David,
the Randy
L.A. family. Began to do a series of concerts in Malibu in our home in 2005. And we sort of dreamed of the idea of having really outstanding musicians, of which there are endless amounts in Los Angeles. And but this particular group was made out of people who could play in the orchestra, but also any one of them could be a soloist, anybody of them could be a leader. And so again, it's a little bit the same in that we draw energy from people who have a real reason to be there, and it creates a unique kind of orchestra where everybody kind of pulls their own weight, and maybe as conductor I tend to guide as much as anything the wonderful expression that comes out of people that feel important in their role in the orchestra rather than as just sort of cogs.
But there's a big difference between being a performer, even in something as visible as a string quartet, and conducting. What was it that made you step out from the ranks and stand in front of the group and take all the slings and arrows?
Oh, good question. I always liked conducting. I started doing it when I was in college and conservatory in New York. We founded and established the International House Chamber Orchestra, which was made up of Manhattan School of Music and Juilliard students. And it was a string orchestra, but I stepped in many, many times and conducted, and always liked the feeling, like I said, of guiding the efforts rather than controlling. So you take people that have a lot of energy, allow them to develop a relationship with one another in terms of the music, and then hopefully just guide that in a way that makes it the most effective.
You know, every time I go to, especially a classical concert and watch the conductors, nobody's looking at the conductor. They're all looking at their music sheets. And so I always wonder, what's the conductor there for? I mean, if nobody's paying attention to this guy? Occasionally they'll glance up. Occasionally he's pointing over here. Occasionally he's doing this thing with his hand. What does the conductor do? You say guide, but is it out of the peripheral? Again, ignorant question, I know, but that's one of the things I don't understand.
A great orchestra like the LA Phil can probably play their way through something really without a conductor for the most part. But it is the shaping of the music, bringing the vision, especially to a large orchestra.
But that shaping happens before they actually perform?
Yes, a lot of it. A lot of it happens in rehearsal. Right. So you might have 3 or 4 rehearsals prior to that concert or set of concerts where you kind of work things out. But the music's not memorized, and people are accustomed to reading. But trust me, there's a peripheral sense of that energy coming from the conductor. And of course, we all know that there are better and worse conductors. So sometimes it pays to ignore the conductor, and then sometimes it doesn't. But but as somebody who's dynamic and brings vision or excitement or energy to the performance is really making a difference.
Which gets me to the third thing that's keeping you busy. In addition to performing and conducting, you also write music. And you write music for film and for television. It seems like anything that needs music, you've got it written for. Who are some of the projects you've written music for?
Well, what I do is, and I don't claim to be specifically a composer, although I've composed a lot. But I usually work in conjunction with a composer who has perhaps a background similar to mine in classical or in small music forms. And what we try to do is to bring that sort of expensive sense of great sound or acoustic music to projects, whether they're large or small. And over the course of the years, I've worked in many, many ways with lots and lots of well-known people. Of course, like I mentioned, the almost the entire Newman family. We've collaborated with one way or another. Marco Beltrami, Hans Zimmer, John Debney, just a huge array of people that we work alongside in a collaborative way.
Well, we've got a couple clips, and I want to play a music clip to give us a sense of what your music sounds like. We've got 2 radically different styles, and then I want to have you describe sort of what the use of these was. So let's play the first audio clip. Now, that's but a small piece of a larger project, but tell me about that one.
Okay, so the actual cue was drawn from a piece that was actually written by my wife, Maria Newman, and it was a concert piece, but we used it in a film called Heaven's Rain by director Brooks Douglas, and it was a courtroom. Excuse me, it was the Oklahoma State House of Representatives. And the hero of this particular film is standing up to introduce a very important piece of legislation. He's a junior senator, and is, you know, initially it opens the scene, and it's also used later when this particular bill passes, even though all the senior senators in the thing had opposed him. So,
All right, let's try a second clip, which is a totally different texture piece. Let's listen to it, and then I want to talk about the process of how you went about composing these. But let's play the second clip. So tell us about that one.
well, interesting that of the ones I provided, these are both actually from the same film. Also, this was an adaptation of similar music by Maria Newman. What it was music that went against picture. Or so the mood of the music is kind of serene, but the actual scene is of the hero who has been, I mean, both mentally and physically injured in a very, very graphic way. But he's healed, but he's working out the demons, and he's actually punching this punching bag and having these flashbacks. And so it's sort of a serene background, but kind of eerie and intense that backs up this scene where he's punching and punching and punching and working out his demons.
So how do you write a piece of music? You're handed the script. You've probably got the rough cut of the film pretty close to locked for time. What process do you go through?
What I try to do, and this is where I feel like my advantage in being a musician comes to play, because I think that when you play a lot and you talk a lot, you discuss music, whether you're a conductor or a performer, you develop language to describe things that are not really supposed to be described in words. And so I feel that when I see something, I am very in touch with the color or the mood or the feeling of the scene, or in the case of the last cue, kind of the opposite. Like how do you frame something in a way that draws emotion from that? Because it's easy to, if it's a violent scene, it's easy to be violent. So I'm looking for a direction, and then what I try to do is then come up with a texture that fits that scene. So, if it's warm and tender, I think of strings or something, that can embrace. But but of course the texture of something that's more noble would have fit the first cue. It was like about the courtroom and about seriousness and drama. And so I try to interpret a feeling first, and then either create or paint with music that I've worked with, something that is seamlessly works with that scene.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, you're dealing a lot with budget, obviously. I mean, especially in those small films where they can only afford a certain amount of instruments, a certain amount of people, and especially when you're dealing with like a choral arrangement that you just did here. There's only a certain amount of people. What can you choose within the constraints of the budget? I mean, that stuff sounds absolutely wonderful, but is it expensive?
What you were hearing is expensive. I mean, the brass players are, I would consider the A-list brass players in Los Angeles were playing that. So that is expensive. But part of it is that small amounts of people can make a huge difference. So I've worked with composers many, many times on writing or developing a chamber score, which has, nowadays you can mic things so brilliantly and bring things to life with just a handful of voices. And if each one of those has a commitment, or you can take something that is use modern technology and use samples and use those things to begin with, and then overlay something real over the top of it, and all of a sudden It has a deeply dramatic and again, that expensive feel without an expensive budget.
So me as an independent filmmaker, I can come to you and hire you, maybe,
Yes, you sure
and
can.
you would,
Yes.
you and I would share the same budget perception.
Yes, yeah, and that's really important because you start off with that, and a lot of times what happens with films is that a new filmmaker or a filmmaker gets really excited about their film and kind of forgets that music often is the part that kind of ties it together emotionally. And we'll sit on a scoring stage and you're watching the film without music, and boy, it's just it's such a empty experience until that
we
comes
need
in.
to bring you back and have you walk us
I
through the
know.
process of
God, I
composing.
can't.
Where can people go on the web to learn about the orchestra? What website?
Well, that would be the MalibuFriendsOfMusic.org,
MalibuFriendsOfMusic.org, and how about your own website?
and that would be ScottHosfeld.com.
That's all one word,
That's
SCOTT.
SCOTTHOSFELD.com.
It's always reassuring when he can spell his own website. Scott Hosfeld is the conductor
So many more questions
and
I have.
founder of the Malibu Coast Orchestra. Scott, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. My
Thank you,
pleasure.
Scott.
Thank you. All right.